The gunshot echoed across the Colorado prairie, making Penelope Avery flinch as she peered through the dusty stage-coach window. It wasn't bandits this time, just the driver shooting at a rattlesnake. Clutching her threadbare carpetbag closer, she reminded herself that anything would be better than what she left behind in Boston. Even if anything meant Platteville, Colorado, a town she'd only learned existed 3 weeks ago when she answered the newspaper advertisement. The year was 1878, and Penelope was 22 years old with nothing but $15 to her name, a teaching certificate, and a desperate plan to rebuild her shattered life. When the stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of a weathered sign reading Platteville, Colorado, population 437, she drew a deep breath. This dusty frontier outpost would either be her salvation or her undoing. "End of the line, miss," the driver called, opening the door with a creak. Penelope stepped down into ankle-deep dust, surveying the single main street lined with wooden buildings. A general store, saloon, blacksmith, and what appeared to be a small schoolhouse stood in various states of sturdiness. Men in cowboy hats and women in practical frontier dresses moved with purpose, some stopping to stare at the newcomer. "Miss Avery," a tall man approached, removing his hat to reveal a shock of silver-streaked dark hair. "I'm Mayor Thompson. We received your letter accepting the teaching position." "Yes, thank you for meeting me." Penelope straightened her travel-worn blue dress. "I'm eager to begin my duties. Term doesn't start for another 3 weeks, but we can get you settled in the teacherage behind the schoolhouse." He gestured toward a tiny cabin barely visible from where they stood. "It's humble, but it's yours with the position." As they walked, the mayor continued, "We're a growing community, Miss Avery, mostly ranching families and a few merchants. The previous teacher left us rather suddenly to marry a railroad man from Denver." He cleared his throat. "We expect our teacher to be of exemplary moral character." Penelope nodded firmly. "Of course. Good, good. Well, here we are." He handed her a small iron key. "Town council meeting tonight if you'd like to attend. Meet the folks who will be entrusting their children to you." After the mayor departed, Penelope pushed open the door to her new home. The single room contained a narrow bed, a pot-bellied stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a small bookshelf. A basin and pitcher sat atop a washstand in the corner. It was sparse but clean, and most importantly, it was hers. She unpacked her few belongings, careful with the framed daguerreotype of her parents, both lost to influenza 5 years ago. After freshening up as best she could, she changed into her second dress, navy blue with a white collar, respectable enough for a town meeting. The town hall was actually the back room of Platteville's only restaurant. As Penelope entered, conversations hushed momentarily as curious eyes assessed her. Mayor Thompson waved her over. "Miss Avery, please join us. We were just discussing the Harvest Festival plans." She sat at an empty chair, nodding politely to those around her. The meeting proceeded with discussions of road repairs, the upcoming harvest, and finally, her introduction. "Our new schoolteacher, Miss Penelope Avery, has arrived from Boston," Mayor Thompson announced. "Term starts after the harvest, but she's here early to get settled." "Boston?" A weathered woman raised an eyebrow. What brings a city girl all the way to Platteville? Penelope had prepared for this question. "I wanted to be part of building something meaningful. The frontier needs education as much as it needs brave settlers." This seemed to satisfy most, though some skeptical glances remained. As the meeting concluded, various townspeople introduced themselves, including Mrs. Holloway, who ran the general store, Sheriff Benson, and Dr. Willis, who served Platteville and surrounding ranches. "Miss Avery," a deep voice came from behind her as the crowd thinned. She turned to face a tall man with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His eyes were the color of a summer sky, and despite the trail dust on his clothes, he carried himself with quiet dignity. Yates Quentin. My ranch is about 5 miles east of town, Mr. Quentin. She nodded politely, noticing the calluses on his extended hand as she shook it. I've got 2 nephews who'll be in your school. Boys need education, especially out here. There was something guarded in his expression that piqued her curiosity. I look forward to teaching them, Mr. Quentin. Most folks just call me Yates. He shifted his weight. Mayor mentioned you arrived without much. If you need anything hauled from the general store, I've got my wagon outside. That's very kind, but now don't you go turning down help out of pride, Miss Avery, Mrs. Holloway interrupted, approaching them. That's not how we survive out here. Yates, the poor girl needs everything from pots to bedding. I've got it all set aside. Penelope flushed. I can't possibly. School board voted in advance on your salary, Mayor Thompson said, joining them. Consider it a welcome gift. Can't have our teacher sleeping on a bare mattress with winter coming. Overwhelmed by their generosity, Penelope acquiesced. Soon, she found herself seated beside Yates Quentin in his wagon, heading toward the general store where Mrs. Holloway had indeed prepared a substantial collection of necessities. How long have you been in Platteville, Mr. Quentin? Penelope asked as they loaded the wagon, born near here before it was even called Platteville. He secured a trunk of bedding. My father started the ranch with nothing but 20 head of cattle and sheer stubbornness. And now, got about 500 head, a decent stretch of land. He glanced at her. What about you? Boston's a long way from here. Yes, it is. Her tone made it clear she wouldn't elaborate. They rode back to her small cabin in comfortable silence. When they arrived, Yates efficiently carried in her purchases while she directed their placement. Thank you for your help, Penelope said as he brought in the last box. I appreciate your kindness to a stranger. Yates paused at the doorway. No strangers in Platteville, Miss Avery, just folks we haven't gotten to know yet. He settled his hat on his head. Those nephews I mentioned, they live with me. Their pa, my brother, died last year. Their ma passed when they were little. I'm sorry to hear that. They're good boys. William's 12 and Daniel's 10. He hesitated. They could use a woman's influence. We all could at the ranch. Before Penelope could respond to this curious statement, he tipped his hat. Good evening, Miss Avery. Welcome to Platteville. As she watched him drive away, Penelope couldn't help but feel there was more behind his words than simple neighborliness. The following days passed in a flurry of activity. Penelope cleaned the schoolhouse from top to bottom, organized books, and prepared lessons. She met more townspeople, many of whom invited her to dinner or brought food to her door. It seemed the entire town was eager to evaluate their new teacher. A week after her arrival, Penelope was arranging books when she heard the schoolhouse door open. Miss Avery. Yates Quentin stood in the doorway, hat in hand. Behind him were 2 boys, one tall and lanky with serious eyes, the other smaller with a smattering of freckles across his nose. Mr. Quentin, what a pleasant surprise. She smiled at the boys. And you must be William and Daniel. The boys nodded, studying her cautiously. Boys wanted to meet their teacher before school starts, Yates explained, and I needed supplies from town. Well, I'm delighted to meet you both. Would you like to see the books we'll be using this term? Daniel nodded eagerly while William maintained his reserved demeanor. As Penelope showed them around the schoolhouse, she noticed Yates watching her interactions with the boys carefully. You're from Boston, William finally spoke. Pa said Boston folks think they're better than everyone else. William, Yates warned. It's all right, Penelope said. Some Bostonians might think that way, William, but I don't. I believe people should be judged by their character, not where they come from. The boy seemed to consider this. Can you ride a horse? I can, though perhaps not as well as Colorado children. Uncle Yates is teaching us to rope cattle, Daniel volunteered. Maybe he could teach you too. Yates looked distinctly uncomfortable. Miss Avery probably has more important things to do, Daniel. Actually, I'd love to learn more about ranching, Penelope said. Perhaps you boys could teach me when school begins. This suggestion seemed to please the children, and even Yates's expression softened. We should let Miss Avery get back to her work, Yates finally said. Boys, wait outside for a moment. Once the children had gone, Yates approached Penelope. Miss Avery, there's something I should mention. The Harvest Festival is in 2 weeks. It's tradition for unmarried folks to attend together, sort of a courting opportunity. He cleared his throat. You'll likely receive several invitations, but I wanted to. That is, would you consider attending with me and the boys? Penelope was startled by the request. Is this a common practice for a teacher? The last teacher went with the blacksmith's son, if that's what you're asking. It's just a community gathering, dancing, food, celebration of the harvest. He shifted uncomfortably. No obligation beyond that. Penelope considered the implications. As the new teacher, she needed to integrate into the community, and attending with a respected rancher and his nephews seemed appropriate. I'd be pleased to accompany you and the boys, Mr. Quentin. Relief washed over his features. Good, that's good. He turned to leave, then paused. The boys and we've been thinking. The ranch house has plenty of room. If you ever want to visit on weekends, get away from town, you'd be welcome. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her puzzled by his behavior. It almost seemed as if Yates Quentin was courting her, but surely that couldn't be the case. They barely knew each other. The next day, Mrs. Holloway clarified matters when Penelope visited the general store. So Yates asked you to the festival, did he? The older woman sorted through fabric bolts. Can't say I'm surprised. He's been watching the stagecoach arrivals ever since he placed that advertisement. Advertisement? Penelope felt a chill. What advertisement? Mrs. Holloway looked up sharply. The teaching position advertisement. Yates paid for it to be run in Boston papers specifically. Said we needed someone with proper education to teach the children. I see. Penelope's mind raced. And was he similarly involved in hiring the previous teacher? Heavens no. That was before his brother passed. Since taking in those boys, Yates has been different, more concerned with education and such. Mrs. Holloway selected a length of blue calico. This would make a lovely festival dress, brings out your eyes. Penelope tried to focus on the fabric, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Had Yates Quentin orchestrated her coming to Platteville? And if so, why? That evening, a knock at her door revealed Sheriff Benson holding a letter. Eastern mail came through, Miss Avery. This arrived for you. She thanked him and closed the door before examining the envelope. The Boston postmark made her hands tremble. She broke the seal and read quickly, relief flooding through her. The attorney had successfully sold her parents' home, and the remaining debts were settled. There would be no further claims against her. Penelope sank into a chair, the weight of the past finally lifting. She had truly escaped, and no one in Platteville needed to know what had happened in Boston, the broken engagement, the scandal, the near ruination of her reputation. Here, she could start anew. Her thoughts turned to Yates Quentin and his puzzling behavior. If he had specifically sought a Boston teacher, what were his motives? The Harvest Festival might provide an opportunity to discover more about the enigmatic rancher. The following Sunday, Penelope attended church services, where Reverend Fuller preached about Ruth and Boaz, a not-so-subtle sermon on the virtues of marriage that had several unmarried women glancing at eligible bachelors. Afterward, during the community luncheon, Penelope found herself surrounded by curious women. "So you'll be attending the Harvest Festival with Yates Quentin?" Mrs. Peterson, the blacksmith's wife, asked while passing her a plate of fried chicken. "Yes, and his nephews," Penelope clarified. "Those poor boys need a mother's touch," Mrs. Miller sighed. "Yates does his best, but a ranch is no place for children without a woman's influence." "I'm their teacher, not their mother," Penelope reminded her. The women exchanged knowing glances. "For now," Mrs. Holloway said under her breath. Before Penelope could respond, Yates appeared at the edge of their circle, looking uncomfortable among so many women. "Miss Avery, I wondered if you might like to see the ranch before the festival. Get acquainted with the place. The boys are eager to show you around." Several women stifled smiles, but Penelope maintained her composure. "That sounds lovely, Mr. Quentin. When would be convenient? Saturday. I could collect you around noon. Perfect. I look forward to it." As he walked away, Mrs. Peterson leaned in. "If I were 20 years younger and unmarried, I'd set my cap for that man myself. Finest ranch in the county, and he's built that new house just last year." "New house?" Penelope asked despite herself. "Oh yes, 2 stories with glass windows and a real kitchen." Everyone wondered why a bachelor would build such a fine home. Now we know. Mrs. Peterson patted Penelope's hand meaningfully. "You're mistaken," Penelope protested. "Mr. Quentin and I hardly know each other." "Marriages out here often start that way," Mrs. Holloway said. "My Henry proposed after knowing me 3 weeks. We had 42 good years together before he passed." Penelope excused herself, suddenly needing fresh air. Outside the church, she found William Quentin sitting alone on the steps. "Hello, William. Not enjoying the luncheon," he shrugged. "Don't like folks staring and whispering. They do it all the time since Pa died." Penelope sat beside him. "I understand that feeling. People have whispered about me too." The boy looked at her with renewed interest. "Why?" "Sometimes people don't understand our choices or circumstances, so they create stories to explain them." "Like how everyone thinks Uncle Yates is going to marry you?" William asked bluntly. Penelope nearly choked. "Is that what they're saying?" William nodded. "Daniel hopes so. He misses having a ma. I don't remember ours much." "William, your uncle and I barely know each other. He knows about you. He's got that Boston newspaper with your picture in it." "What?" Penelope's heart pounded. "From when you won that teaching award or something." "Uncle Yates said you were the smartest teacher in Boston, and that's why he wrote to you special." Before Penelope could question him further, Daniel came bounding up. "Uncle Yates says it's time to go home, Will." William stood. "See you Saturday, Miss Avery." Penelope watched them go, her mind spinning with questions. Had Yates sought her out specifically? And if so, how much did he know about her past? Saturday arrived clear and cool, with the first hints of autumn coloring the distant mountains. Penelope wore her second-best dress and a practical bonnet. When Yates arrived in his wagon, she noted he'd made an effort with his appearance as well, wearing a clean shirt and his best denims. "The boys are excited about your visit," he said as he helped her into the wagon. "They've been cleaning their room since sunrise." "They share a room in your new house?" Penelope asked innocently. If Yates was surprised by her knowledge, he didn't show it. "For now. House has 4 bedrooms. I planned ahead." The drive to the Quentin Ranch took nearly an hour, during which Yates pointed out landmarks and neighboring properties. As they crested a hill, the ranch spread before them a verdant valley with grazing cattle, a large barn bunkhouse, and at its center, the impressive 2-story house William had mentioned. "Yates, it's beautiful," Penelope breathed. "Land's been in the family since '49. My father came for the gold rush but stayed for the ranching." Pride colored his voice. Wasn't much when he started, but each generation's built it up. The boys raced out to meet the wagon, eager to show Penelope everything. They toured the barn, where Daniel demonstrated how he could milk the cow, and the corral where William showed off his roping skills. Throughout it all, Penelope noticed Yates watching her reactions carefully. Inside the house, Penelope was impressed by the craftsmanship and attention to detail. The parlor held a piano, the kitchen gleamed with a new cast iron stove, and upstairs, 4 bedrooms waited the master, the boys' room, and 2 empty rooms with bare mattresses. "This one could be a nursery," Daniel said innocently as they passed one empty room. "And this one could be for guests or maybe more children." Yates cleared his throat. "Daniel, that's enough. Let's show Miss Avery the kitchen garden." After the tour, they enjoyed a surprisingly good meal prepared by Yates himself. "Ranch work teaches a man to cook or starve," he explained when Penelope complimented the venison stew. As afternoon stretched into evening, Penelope found herself reluctant to leave. The ranch had a peaceful quality missing in town, and the boys' enthusiasm was infectious. When Yates finally said it was time to return her to town, she felt a pang of disappointment. On the drive back, Yates seemed to struggle with something. Finally, as the lights of Platteville appeared in the distance, he spoke. "Miss Avery, Penelope, if I may, I need to be honest with you." She tensed. "Yes, William mentioned he told you about the newspaper. I should explain." He slowed the horses. "Last year, after my brother died, I realized the boys needed more than I could give them. They needed education, refinement, things a mother would provide." "So you decided to find them a mother?" Penelope asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Not exactly. I decided to find a teacher for Platteville. The boys' education came first." He glanced at her. "I happened to see an article about a Boston teacher who developed new methods for frontier education." "Your methods?" "The Chronicle article," Penelope murmured, remembering the piece written about her teaching innovations. "Yes, I convinced the town council we needed a proper Eastern-educated teacher. When they agreed, I made sure the advertisement ran in Boston papers." He paused. "I hoped you might apply, but I didn't expect you would." "Why me specifically?" "The article spoke of your dedication, your willingness to adapt traditional education to different circumstances. Platteville needed someone like that." He hesitated. "And I admit your photograph accompanied the article. You had kind eyes." Penelope wasn't sure whether to be flattered or offended. "Mr. Quentin, did you bring me here under false pretenses?" "No." His denial was immediate. "The teaching position is genuine. The town needs you. The children need you." He slowed the wagon further. "But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't hoped for more. Not immediately, of course. I'm not that presumptuous." "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I admired what I knew of you before you arrived. Now that I've met you, that admiration has only grown." He pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of town. "The harvest will be done soon. Winter comes early in Colorado. The boys and I, we need, the ranch needs." "A woman's touch," Penelope supplied, recalling Mrs. Miller's words. Yates looked chagrined. "It sounds mercenary when put that way. I'm not offering a business arrangement, Penelope. I'm suggesting we might suit each other given time. You hardly know me. I know enough. You're kind, intelligent, good with children. The rest we can discover together." He turned to face her fully. "I'm not proposing marriage this instant. I'm proposing possibility." Penelope was speechless. In Boston, courtships followed strict protocols spanning months or years. Here on the frontier, practicality seemed to override convention. "The Harvest Festival is next weekend," she finally said. "I believe we agreed to attend together. Perhaps we could use that opportunity to become better acquainted." Relief washed over his features. "That sounds reasonable." As they approached her cabin, Penelope realized that despite her reservations about his methods, she wasn't entirely opposed to the possibility Yates suggested. Life in Platteville was proving more interesting than she'd anticipated. The week before the Harvest Festival brought unexpected complications. First, a letter arrived from Boston, not from her attorney this time, but from Jonathan Preston, her former fiancé. He wrote pleadingly of forgiveness and second chances, claiming he'd made a terrible mistake in breaking their engagement. The letter concluded with a promise that he would come to Colorado if she didn't return to Boston. Penelope burned the letter in her stove. Jonathan had chosen his family's approval over her when scandal threatened. His renewed interest now that the scandal had died down meant nothing. The second complication arrived in the form of a telegram from her former headmistress, offering a teaching position at Boston's most prestigious girls' school, the very position Penelope had once dreamed of obtaining. Both communications forced her to evaluate her new life in Platteville. Was she merely hiding from her past? Or was there someone worth staying for? On the morning of the Harvest Festival, Penelope found herself standing before the small mirror in her cabin, assessing her appearance. She wore the new blue calico dress Mrs. Holloway had helped her make, her hair arranged in a simple but flattering style. For the first time since arriving in Platteville, she felt like herself again, not the scandal-tainted woman who fled Boston, but Penelope Avery, respected teacher and independent woman. When Yates arrived with the boys, his appreciative gaze confirmed her efforts had been worthwhile. "Miss Avery, you look beautiful," he said, removing his hat as she opened the door. "Thank you, Mr. Quentin. You all look very handsome yourselves." The boys shuffled their feet at the compliment, dressed in their Sunday best. The Harvest Festival was held in a large meadow at the edge of town. Tables laden with food lined one side, a wooden platform for dancing dominated the center, and various games and activities were scattered throughout. Lanterns hung from posts, ready to illuminate the gathering once darkness fell. As they arrived, Penelope was struck by the transformation of Platteville's citizens. Gone were the practical work clothes, replaced by colorful dresses and polished boots. Even the most weathered ranchers had made efforts with their appearance. "Miss Avery," Mrs. Holloway waved them over. "You must try the cider while it's hot." The afternoon passed pleasantly as Penelope was introduced to families from outlying ranches and farms. She noted how Yates was respected by everyone, from the wealthiest rancher to the humblest farmhand. The boys ran off to join games with other children, leaving Penelope and Yates to navigate the social currents together. "Everyone's watching us," she murmured as they sampled Mrs. Peterson's prize-winning apple pie. "Small towns run on gossip," Yates replied, unperturbed. "Better give them something worth talking about." He offered his arm. "Would you care to dance?" The musicians had begun playing and couples were gathering on the platform. Penelope hesitated only briefly before placing her hand on his arm. "I'd be delighted." As they joined the dancers, Penelope was acutely aware of Yates's proximity. His hand at her waist was respectful but warm through the fabric of her dress. They moved well together, and Penelope found herself relaxing into the dance. "You dance very well for a rancher," she observed. "My mother insisted all her sons learn, said we'd never find wives if we couldn't dance properly." A shadow crossed his face. She was right about most things. "Tell me about your family," Penelope prompted, sensing he needed to talk about them. As they danced, Yates shared stories of growing up on the ranch with his brother, of his parents' devotion to each other, of the hard years and the good ones. Penelope found herself sharing two tales of her childhood in Boston, her parents' encouragement of her education, their deaths that left her alone in the world. "Is that why you came west?" Yates asked as the music changed to a slower tune. "Because you were alone." Penelope considered her answer carefully. "Partly, and partly because I needed a fresh start, running from something." His blue eyes studied her face. "Perhaps running toward something," she countered. "New possibilities." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I'm glad whatever winds blew you here, Penelope." The moment was interrupted by William tugging at Yates's sleeve. "Uncle Yates, Mr. Thompson says the horse races are starting. You promised I could ride Storm." "So I did." Yates turned apologetically to Penelope. "I need to saddle Storm for William. Would you like to watch the races?" "Of course." The horse races were informal affairs, children on ponies, young men showing off their fastest mounts, and a special race for ranchers that Yates was apparently expected to enter. "He's won 3 years running," William told Penelope proudly as Yates mounted a sleek black stallion. "Uncle Yates is the best horseman in the county." Penelope watched as Yates and 5 other men lined up their horses. At the signal, they thundered down the marked course, dust billowing behind them. Yates took an early lead, his form perfect as he and the black horse moved as one. When he crossed the finish line several lengths ahead of his nearest competitor, cheers erupted from the crowd. "Told you," William said smugly as Yates collected his prize, a new bridle crafted by the blacksmith. The sun began to set, and lanterns were lit around the meadow, casting a golden glow over the festivities. After the evening meal, more dancing commenced, this time with Yates partnering not only Penelope but also various town matrons as protocol demanded. Penelope found herself dancing with the mayor, the blacksmith, and even young Mr. Collins from the bank, who stepped on her toes repeatedly while stammering apologies. As the evening progressed, Penelope noticed a change in the music and atmosphere. Younger children were being bundled home, and the remaining dancers were primarily couples. When Yates found her again, the musicians had begun a waltz. "May I have this dance, Miss Avery?" His formal request matched the more intimate nature of the waltz. They moved together more closely than before, the waltz requiring a proximity that made conversation both necessary and difficult. Penelope was conscious of every point where their bodies connected, of his breath near her ear, of the subtle scent of soap and leather that seemed uniquely his. "The boys are staying with Mrs. Holloway tonight," Yates said quietly. "I thought we might talk privately on the way back to town." Penelope's pulse quickened. "What would you like to discuss, Mr. Quentin?" "I think you know, Penelope." His voice was low. "I've made no secret of my admiration for you." The music ended before she could respond, and they were separated again as the final dances were announced. When they finally departed, the boys already settled at Mrs. Holloway's, and expectant tension hung between them. In the wagon, under a canopy of stars, Yates didn't immediately start for town. Instead, he turned to Penelope. "I'm not a man who speaks easily of feelings," he began, "but I believe in being direct. These past weeks, getting to know you, I've come to care for you deeply." Penelope's heart hammered in her chest. "Yates, please let me finish. I know this is sudden by Eastern standards, but out here, we recognize what's valuable when we find it." He took her hands in his. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I hope you'll consider becoming my wife in time." Penelope withdrew her hands gently. "There are things you don't know about me, Yates. I know what matters. The rest you can tell me when you're ready. It's not that simple." She took a deep breath. "I received a telegram this week offering me a prestigious teaching position in Boston, and a letter from someone from my past." Yates stiffened. "I see." "No, you don't." Penelope turned to face him fully. "I'm telling you because I want to be honest. I came to Platteville running from scandal, from a broken engagement, from whispers that followed me everywhere in Boston. What kind of scandal? His voice was carefully neutral. My fiancé's family discovered my father had died with substantial debts. They pressured him to break our engagement. When he did, publicly and humiliatingly, I confronted him at a society function. Penelope's voice caught. It was unladylike and caused quite the sensation. My reputation was damaged. Teaching positions dried up. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like Providence. And now this man wants you back, he says he does. Penelope looked down at her hands. And once that would have meant everything to me. And now, she met his gaze steadily. Now I find my priorities have changed. Boston holds nothing for me anymore. Relief washed over Yates's features. And the teaching position. Once it was my dream. But I've discovered I can make a difference here in Platteville too. She hesitated. However, your proposal, it's too soon, Yates. I barely know you and the boys deserve certainty. Yates nodded slowly. I understand, but will you consider it? Give us time to know each other better. Yes, Penelope said softly. I will consider it. When they reached her cabin, Yates walked her to the door. In the moonlight, his expression was tender as he took her hand. Thank you for today, he said. For the dance, for your honesty, for considering a future here. Before she could respond, he leaned down and brushed his lips against hers, a kiss so gentle it was barely more than a whisper. Yet it sent warmth spreading through Penelope's entire body. Good night, Penelope, he murmured, stepping back. Good night, Yates. Inside her cabin, Penelope touched her fingers to her lips, wondering how a man she'd known only weeks could make her feel more valued than the fiancé she'd known for years. The weeks that followed brought changes to Platteville. The harvest was completed, winter preparations began, and school commenced with 15 students ranging from 6 to 15 years old. Penelope threw herself into teaching, establishing routines and earning the children's respect and affection. Yates visited town frequently, sometimes with the boys, sometimes alone. Their courtship progressed through Sunday dinners after church, chaperoned rides across the prairie, and occasional suppers at her cabin with the boys. Each meeting deepened Penelope's understanding of the man behind the quiet exterior. She learned of his hopes for the ranch, his dedication to his nephews, his love of poetry that he concealed from most people. In turn, she shared more of herself, her childhood in Boston, her passion for teaching, her dreams of someday writing educational texts for frontier schools. October brought the first snowfall and another letter from Jonathan, this one announcing his intention to visit at Thanksgiving. Penelope replied firmly, telling him not to come, that her life had taken a new direction. Whether he would heed her wishes remained to be seen. One crisp Saturday, Yates arrived at her cabin alone, looking unusually serious. I need to speak with you, he said when she invited him in. About the boys. Is something wrong? Penelope said about making coffee, concerned by his grave expression. Daniel has been having nightmares again. About his parents. Yates accepted the coffee cup she offered. He wakes up calling for his mother, and when I go to him, he asks why he can't have a new mother like his friend Thomas. Thomas Miller just got a stepmother, Penelope recalled. His father remarried last month. Yes. And now Daniel is convinced that if I don't find them a mother soon, they'll be alone if. He didn't finish the thought. If something happened to you, Penelope completed softly. Yates nodded, his expression pained. The boys lost their father suddenly. David went out to check the herd during a storm and never came back. They're terrified of losing me too. Penelope moved to sit beside him, placing her hand over his. Children who have experienced loss often fear it will happen again. It's natural. William is angry about it. Says we don't need anyone else but Daniel. He sighed heavily. I don't know how to give them what they need, Penelope. You're doing your best, Yates. My best isn't enough. He turned his hand to clasp hers. Penelope, I know we agreed to take time, but winter's coming. The boys need stability, security, understanding dawned. Are you proposing again, Yates? I am. Not just for the boys, though they need you desperately, for myself as well. His blue eyes held hers. I've come to love you, Penelope. I believe we could build a good life together. Penelope's heart raced. Over these weeks, her feelings for Yates had deepened into something she'd never experienced before, not the girlish infatuation she'd felt for Jonathan, but a steadier, stronger emotion built on respect and genuine affection. The timing is still not ideal, she said slowly. School has just begun and Mrs. Patterson taught before she married. She could substitute if needed. Yates leaned forward. Penelope, I'm not asking you to give up teaching. I'm asking you to expand your life to include us, me and the boys. And if I'm not ready, then I'll wait. As long as it takes. He squeezed her hand. But I hoped, perhaps by Christmas. The thought of Christmas at the ranch with Yates and the boys creating new traditions and memories filled Penelope with unexpected longing. I need time to think, Yates, she finally said. This isn't a decision to make hastily, he nodded, rising to leave. Of course. But know that we want you in our lives, Penelope, all three of us. After he left, Penelope sat by the window, watching snow begin to fall again. Marriage to Yates meant more than gaining a husband. It meant becoming mother to two wounded boys, mistress of a substantial ranch, a permanent part of this frontier community. Was she ready for such responsibility? Yet when she imagined returning to Boston, to the constraints of society and the whispers that would follow her, the choice became clearer. In Platteville, she'd found not just escape but purpose. And in Yates Quentin, she'd found a man of integrity, kindness, and quiet strength. The next day after church, Penelope approached Yates as he helped the boys into the wagon. Could I speak with you privately? She asked. He nodded, instructing the boys to wait in the wagon. They walked a few paces away, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. I've been thinking about your proposal, Penelope began, about what it would mean for all of us. Yates watched her face carefully. And, before I give you my answer, I need to be certain of something. She met his gaze directly. Do you truly love me, Yates? Not just the idea of me, not just a mother for the boys or a wife for your ranch, but me, Penelope. His voice was rough with emotion. I began with practical considerations, I won't deny that, but from the moment I met you, it's been about much more. He took her gloved hands in his. I love your kindness, your intelligence, your courage in starting anew. I love how you light up when teaching, how you listen to the boys' stories with genuine interest, how you stand your ground when you believe you're right. His words warmed her more than any fire could have. Then yes, Yates Quentin, I will marry you, before Christmas, if that's what you wish. Joy transformed his features. Without regard for propriety or the watching townsfolk, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly, not the gentle brush of lips from the harvest festival, but a kiss that spoke of passion and promise. When they separated, both breathless, Yates pressed his forehead to hers. You've made me the happiest man in Colorado, Penelope Avery. From the wagon, Daniel's voice called out. Does this mean Miss Avery is going to be our mother? Yates laughed, keeping one arm around Penelope as they turned to the boys. If she'll have us, yes. William's expression remained guarded, but Daniel beamed with happiness. Can we tell everyone? I think that kiss already did, Penelope said, blushing as she noticed the smiling faces of churchgoers watching them. News of their engagement spread through Platteville like wildfire. Mrs. Holloway immediately began planning a wedding quilt, and Mayor Thompson offered the use of the town hall for the ceremony. Reverend Fuller suggested the first Saturday in December, giving them time to prepare while still fulfilling Yates's wish for a Christmas with his new family properly established. Penelope wrote to her attorney in Boston, instructing him to forward her remaining possessions and informing him of her upcoming marriage. She also sent a final letter to Jonathan, making it clear that her future lay in Colorado with Yates and the boys. The weeks before the wedding were busy with preparations. Penelope continued teaching while also learning more about the ranch operations from Yates. The boys helped her move some of her belongings to the ranch house on weekends, Daniel eagerly showing her where everything belonged while William maintained a polite but distant attitude. One Saturday in late November, while Yates was in town arranging for supplies, Penelope found William alone in the barn, practicing his roping on a straw-filled dummy. "You're getting quite good at that," she observed, keeping a respectful distance. William shrugged without looking at her. Pa was better. He could rope a calf from twice this distance. "Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man." He was. William coiled his rope with unnecessary force. "Uncle Yates is trying to replace him." "No one can replace your father, William," Penelope said gently. "Not Yates, and certainly not me." The boy finally met her gaze, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Then why are you marrying Uncle Yates? Why are you coming here?" Penelope considered her answer carefully. "I'm marrying your uncle because I love him, and because I've come to care for you and Daniel too. I'm not trying to take anyone's place. I'm hoping to create a new place for all of us together." "What if something happens to you too?" The question was barely audible. "Daniel keeps saying you'll be our new mother, but mothers leave. They die." Understanding dawned. William wasn't rejecting her, he was afraid of losing her, of his brother being hurt again. "William, I can't promise nothing will ever happen to me. No one can make that promise." She moved closer, kneeling to meet him at eye level despite the hay soiling her skirt. "But I can promise that as long as I'm here, I'll do my best for you and Daniel. I'll love you both as if you were my own sons." The boy's composure cracked. "I don't remember my real ma," he confessed, a tear escaping. "Pa used to tell stories about her, but now he's gone too, and I can't remember the stories anymore." Penelope opened her arms, and to her surprise, William stepped into them, his thin shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "Then we'll make new stories together," she murmured, holding him. "And I'll help you remember the old ones too." When Yates found them later, William was showing Penelope his father's saddle, preserved in the tack room, recounting memories of riding double with his father across the ranch. Something had shifted between them, a fragile trust beginning to form. That night, after the boys were asleep, Yates and Penelope sat before the fire in the ranch house parlor. "William showed me David's saddle today," she said, watching Yates's face. "He told me stories about him." Yates nodded, understanding the significance. "He hasn't talked about David in months, not since the funeral. He's afraid of forgetting him and afraid of letting himself care for me. And now we've reached an understanding, I think." Penelope smiled softly. "He's agreed to stand with Daniel during the wedding ceremony." Relief washed over Yates's features. "That's more than I hoped for." He reached for her hand. "Thank you for your patience with him, with all of us. They're going to be my family too, Yates. Their happiness matters to me." He brought her hand to his lips. "2 more weeks until you're officially a Quentin." "Penelope Quentin," she tested the name. "It has a nice sound to it." "The finest name in Colorado," Yates agreed with a smile. As their wedding day approached, an unexpected complication arose. 3 days before the ceremony, Penelope was at the schoolhouse completing end-of-term assessments when the door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and a well-dressed stranger. "May I help you?" she asked, rising from her desk. The man removed his hat, revealing handsome features and familiar brown eyes that once had made her heart race. "Hello, Penelope." Shock rendered her momentarily speechless. "Jonathan, what are you doing here? I told you I would come." He stepped further into the room, shaking snow from his expensive coat. "Did you think I wouldn't? I wrote explicitly asking you not to." Penelope remained behind her desk, maintaining distance between them. "Your letter made it clear someone was pressuring you into marriage." Jonathan moved closer. "I couldn't allow that without at least speaking to you first." "No one is pressuring me, Jonathan. I'm marrying a good man whom I love." "After knowing him, 2 months?" Jonathan's tone was incredulous. "The Penelope I knew would never make such a hasty decision." "People change. I've changed." She straightened her shoulders. "You should not have come. There's nothing for you here. Nothing except the woman I let slip away." He reached the desk, placing his hands on its surface and leaning forward. "I made a terrible mistake, Penny. My parents were wrong." "I was wrong. I've missed you every day since you left." Once, those words would have meant everything to Penelope. Now they evoked only a distant ache, like remembering an old injury long healed. "I'm sorry you traveled so far for nothing, Jonathan, but my future is here now." "With some uneducated rancher," Jonathan scoffed. "This isn't you, Penny. This isn't the life you dreamed of." "You don't know me anymore," Penelope said quietly. "And you certainly don't know Yates or what our life together will be." "Is everything all right, Miss Avery?" Sheriff Benson's voice came from the doorway. "Saw a stranger enter the school, thought I'd check." "Everything's fine, Sheriff. Mr. Preston was just leaving." Penelope's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Jonathan hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small package. "At least take this. A wedding gift if you insist on going through with it." He placed the package on the desk and turned to leave, nodding curtly to the sheriff as he passed. After the door closed behind him, Sheriff Benson approached Penelope. "Want me to run him out of town? Wouldn't be the first city slicker I've escorted to the territorial line." Despite her turmoil, Penelope smiled. "That won't be necessary, Sheriff, but thank you for checking on me." "That's what community does, Miss Avery." He tipped his hat. "Yates is a good friend. Wouldn't want any trouble before your big day." After the sheriff departed, Penelope stared at the small package on her desk. Finally, she unwrapped it to find a velvet jewelry box containing the pearl earrings that had belonged to Jonathan's grandmother, the ones he'd promised would be hers on their wedding day. She closed the box firmly and placed it in her desk drawer. Later, she would return it to Jonathan at the hotel where he was undoubtedly staying. For now, she had assessments to complete and a future to prepare for one that had no place for old promises or broken dreams. That evening, Yates arrived at her cabin as planned to discuss final wedding arrangements. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, taking her hands in his. Penelope couldn't bring herself to lie. "Jonathan Preston arrived in Platteville today. He came to the schoolhouse." Yates stiffened, his expression darkening. "Your former fiancé, the one who humiliated you?" "Yes." She squeezed his hands. "He seems to think he can persuade me to return to Boston with him." "And can he?" The question was asked quietly, but Penelope heard the fear beneath it. "No," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. "Not in 1,000 years." The tension in Yates's shoulders eased slightly. "What does he want?" "To ease his conscience, I think. To believe he's not the villain in our story." She sighed. "He brought a gift, earrings that were to be mine when we married. I plan to return them tomorrow. Would you like me to accompany you?" "No, this is something I need to do alone." Penelope touched his cheek. "But thank you for offering, for understanding." Yates turned his face to press a kiss to her palm. "I trust you, Penelope, but I don't trust him. Jonathan isn't a threat, just a remnant of a life I no longer want." She moved closer, settling into the circle of his arms. "In 3 days I'll be your wife. That's all that matters now." The following morning, Penelope went to the small hotel where Jonathan was staying. The owner, Mrs. Duncan, gave her a knowing look but directed her to the parlor rather than Jonathan's room, maintaining propriety. Jonathan was clearly surprised when she entered. "Penelope, I didn't expect. I've brought your grandmother's earrings," she interrupted, placing the box on the table between them. "They should remain in your family. They were meant for you." His voice held genuine regret. "For my wife. A position that will be filled by someone else." Penelope remained standing, making it clear this was not a social call. "I wish you happiness, Jonathan, truly, but my future lies here. With a man you barely know, in this." He gestured dismissively. This wilderness has given me more in 2 months than Boston society gave me in years. Respect, purpose, genuine affection without conditions. I made one mistake." "No, you made a choice." Penelope's voice was firm but not unkind. "You chose your family's approval over me when I needed you most. That wasn't a mistake, it was a revelation of character." Jonathan flinched. "That's unfair, perhaps, but it's true." She moved toward the door. "The morning stage leaves tomorrow. I suggest you be on it. And if I choose to stay, to attend this wedding of yours, that would be unwise." Penelope paused at the door. "Goodbye, Jonathan. I wish you well." As she walked back to her cabin, Penelope felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The ghost of Boston no longer haunted her. Her heart and mind were fully committed to her future in Platteville, with Yates and the boys. To her surprise, Yates was waiting on her porch when she returned, looking troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately concerned. "William's missing. Rode off after I told him Preston was in town." Yates ran a hand through his hair. "He took it in his head that you might leave with him." "Oh no." Penelope felt sick. The fragile trust she'd built with William now seemed in jeopardy. "Where would he go?" "Daniel thinks he went to the old line cabin up north. It's where David used to take him fishing." Yates looked grim. "It's a half-day's ride and snow's coming. We need to find him. I'm heading out now. Daniel's with Mrs. Holloway." Yates touched her cheek briefly. "I'll bring him home, Penelope. I'm coming with you." "It's dangerous terrain and the weather. He's running because he's afraid I'll abandon him," Penelope said firmly. "Words won't convince him otherwise. Actions might." Yates studied her face, then nodded. "Can you be ready in 10 minutes? We need to move quickly." While Yates arranged for horses, Penelope changed into her sturdiest dress and boots, adding layers against the cold. She had ridden before, but never in such conditions and never with such high stakes. They set out with provisions and extra blankets, following a trail only Yates could discern. As they rode, the sky darkened ominously and the first snowflakes began to fall. "If the snow gets heavy, we'll have to turn back," Yates warned. "It's not safe in a blizzard. We can't abandon him," Penelope insisted. "William knows these mountains. If he reaches the cabin, he'll be safe until the storm passes." Yates's expression was torn between concern for his nephew and fear for Penelope. They rode in silence after that, the snow falling more heavily with each passing hour. By mid-afternoon, visibility was poor, and Penelope was chilled despite her layers. Still, they pressed on, following the increasingly obscured trail toward the line cabin. Just as the storm reached blizzard strength, Yates pointed ahead. "There, the cabin." Through the swirling snow, Penelope could just make out the dark shape of a small structure. As they approached, she saw smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was inside. Yates dismounted quickly, helping Penelope down before leading the horses to a lean-to shelter beside the cabin. When they reached the door, he paused. "Let me go first," he said. "William might be unpredictable right now." Penelope nodded, understanding the delicacy of the situation. Yates pushed open the door to reveal a single room with a small fireplace where flames flickered weakly. William sat huddled before it, his coat still on, looking small and miserable. "William." Yates's voice was gentle despite the worry that had aged him years during their ride. The boy looked up, his expression shifting from defiance to shame when he saw not only his uncle but Penelope as well, snow-covered and clearly exhausted from the journey. "You came after me," he said, his voice small. "Of course we did." Yates moved toward him, removing his gloves. "You frightened us half to death, son," I thought. William's eyes darted to Penelope. "I thought she might leave, like Mom did, like Pa did." "Oh, William." Penelope stepped forward, kneeling before him despite her sodden skirts. "I'm not leaving, not you, not Daniel, not your uncle. You're my family now. But that man from Boston means nothing to me anymore." She took the boy's cold hands in hers. "I rode through a blizzard to find you, William Quentin. Does that seem like the action of someone planning to leave?" Tears filled William's eyes. "No, madam." "I choose you," Penelope said fiercely. "All of you. And I need you to believe that, even when you're scared or angry or missing your parents." William launched himself into her arms then, hugging her with surprising strength. Over his head, Penelope met Yates's gaze, seeing in it a depth of love that took her breath away. "We should get this fire built up," Yates said eventually, his voice rough with emotion. "Storm's not letting up. We'll need to stay here tonight." While Yates tended the fire and cared for the horses, Penelope helped William prepare a simple meal from the provisions they'd brought, and those already stored in the cabin. The boy seemed eager to make amends, following her instructions without protest and volunteering information about the cabin and its history. "Pa built this place before I was born," he explained as they worked. "Said every ranch needs a line cabin for when you're working the far pastures or caught in weather." "Your father was a wise man," Penelope said, measuring coffee into a battered pot. "He would have liked you," William said suddenly. "Pa always said Uncle Yates needed someone smart to keep him on his toes," Penelope laughed. "Did he now? And what do you think?" William considered this seriously. "I think Uncle Yates smiles more since you came, and Daniel doesn't cry at night anymore." He hesitated. "And I think maybe it's okay to have a new mother, even if it means I still miss my first one sometimes." "It is absolutely okay," Penelope assured him. "We can make room in our hearts for all the people we love, past and present." By the time Yates returned from securing the horses, the cabin was warmed by the built-up fire and filled with the aroma of coffee and heated stew. The three of them shared the meal sitting close to the fire, the howling blizzard outside making their shelter seem all the cozier. Later, as William slept wrapped in blankets near the hearth, Yates and Penelope sat side by side on the cabin's only chair, speaking softly. "You were magnificent today," Yates murmured, his arm around her shoulders. "Riding through a blizzard, handling William, not many city women could have managed it." "I'm not many women," Penelope replied with a smile, "and he's worth it. You're all worth it. This isn't quite how I planned to spend the evening 2 days before our wedding." Yates pressed a kiss to her temple. "But somehow it seems fitting. A trial by fire, or rather by snow." Penelope leaned into his warmth. "If we can survive this, marriage should be simple by comparison." "Nothing about life is simple," Yates said thoughtfully, "but having the right partner makes even the difficult things bearable." He turned to face her fully. "I love you, Penelope Avery, more today than yesterday and likely less than tomorrow." "I love you too," she whispered, the words coming easily now. "And I can't wait to be your wife." When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving a pristine white landscape stretching to the horizon. They began the journey back to the ranch, William riding double with Yates, his earlier rebellion replaced by contrition and a new determination to help with wedding preparations. Upon reaching the ranch, they found Daniel waiting anxiously with Mrs. Holloway, who had brought supplies and reassurance during the blizzard. The reunion was emotional, with Daniel clinging to both William and Penelope. "I knew you'd find him," the younger boy said confidently. "Miss Penelope promised she wouldn't let anyone go away again." Mrs. Holloway gave Penelope a knowing look. "Takes more than a blizzard to stop a woman protecting her family," she observed. "You'll do just fine here, Miss Avery." The following day brought another surprise. Jonathan Preston appeared at the ranch, his city clothes exchanged for more practical attire, but still looking distinctly out of place. Yates met him in the yard, his stance protective as Penelope joined them. "Mr. Preston," she acknowledged coolly, "I thought you would have left by now." "I'm on my way," Jonathan assured them, looking uncomfortable under Yates's steady gaze. "The stage leaves in an hour. I wanted to apologize to both of you. This was unexpected." Penelope and Yates exchanged glances. "I spoke to Sheriff Benson this morning," Jonathan continued. "He told me what happened yesterday, about the boy and the blizzard." He turned to Penelope. "You rode into a blizzard for your new family. The Penelope I knew in Boston would never have done that." "As I told you, I've changed," Penelope said quietly. "Yes, you have. For the better, I think." Jonathan extended his hand to Yates. "You're a fortunate man, Mr. Quentin. I hope you know that." Yates studied him for a moment, then accepted the handshake. "I do know it. Every day." "Take care of her," Jonathan said, his tone both a request and a concession. "That goes both ways," Yates replied evenly. With a final nod to Penelope, Jonathan returned to his waiting buggy. As they watched him depart, Penelope felt the last ties to her old life dissolve. "Are you all right?" Yates asked, his arm coming around her waist. "Better than all right," she assured him. "I'm exactly where I belong." The wedding took place as planned on the first Saturday in December. The town hall was transformed with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, and it seemed all of Platteville had turned out for the occasion. Penelope wore a new dress of deep blue velvet that Mrs. Holloway and several other women had helped create, with a matching ribbon in her upswept hair. As she stood before Reverend Fuller with Yates, William and Daniel flanking him, Penelope felt a profound sense of rightness. These three people had become her world in just a few short months, filling the empty spaces in her heart she hadn't even recognized existed. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Fuller began, his voice carrying through the hushed room. "We are gathered here today to join Yates Quentin and Penelope Avery in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. When it came time for the vows, Yates's voice was steady and sure. "I, Yates, take thee, Penelope, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part, according to God's holy ordinance. And thereto I plight thee my troth." When Penelope repeated the vows, her voice carried clearly through the hall, her eyes never leaving Yates's. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Fuller concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." As Yates's lips met hers, sealing their union, the hall erupted in cheers. Daniel hugged them both immediately, while William waited his turn with dignified restraint that broke into a genuine smile when Penelope drew him into the embrace as well. The celebration that followed was joyous, with music and dancing continuing well into the night. As tradition demanded, Yates and Penelope opened the dancing, moving together as naturally as if they'd been partners for years rather than months. "Mrs. Quentin," Yates murmured as they danced. "How does it sound?" Perfect, Penelope replied, her heart full to bursting. Absolutely perfect. Later, after the boys had been sent to stay with Mrs. Holloway for the night, Yates drove Penelope home to the ranch, their home now, officially and completely. The house was warm and welcoming, with a fire already laid in the bedroom fireplace. The boys decorated for Christmas while we were at the hall, Yates explained as they entered, to find evergreen garlands draped along the staircase and a small tree set up in the parlor. They wanted it to be special for your first night here as their mother. Penelope's eyes filled with tears of happiness. It's beautiful. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered each other fully for the first time. Their union as natural and right as everything else between them had become. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, they spoke of the future, of the spring planting, of the children's education, of dreams both practical and fanciful. I never expected this, Penelope confessed, her head on Yates's chest. When I answered that advertisement, I was just looking for escape, for a place to rest my heart until I decided what to do next. And I was just looking for a teacher who might consider becoming a wife before the harvest ended, Yates admitted. I never imagined finding someone who would complete our family so perfectly. Sometimes the things we need find us when we're looking for something else entirely, Penelope mused. Providence, Yates agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. Or perhaps just good fortune. Either way, I'm grateful. Penelope raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes. For you, for the boys, for this life we're building. As am I, my love. Yates drew her down for another kiss. As am I. Christmas at the Quentin Ranch was everything Penelope had hoped for and more. The boys woke at dawn, eager for presents and the special breakfast she had prepared. They spent the day enjoying new books, a sledding expedition, and a feast that had taken Penelope days to prepare with Mrs. Holloway's guidance. In the evening, as they sat before the fire, Yates presented Penelope with a final gift, a leather-bound journal with her new initials embossed on the cover. For your educational texts, he explained. The ones you dream of writing for frontier schools. Touched by his remembrance of a dream she'd mentioned only once, Penelope kissed him tenderly. Thank you for believing in me. Always, he promised. As the boys played with their new toys and Yates added wood to the fire, Penelope looked around the warm, comfortable room filled with the family she had found in this unlikely place. The Boston scandal that had once seemed world-ending now felt like a distant memory, a painful but necessary step in the journey that had brought her here. The cowboy had needed a wife before the harvest, and she had needed a place to rest her heart. Together, they had found so much more: a home, a family, a love built on respect and trust, and the promise of a future brighter than either could have imagined alone. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. But inside the Quentin home, all was warmth and light, and love, a beacon in the wilderness, a testament to new beginnings, and the fulfillment of needs neither had fully understood until they found each other. Spring came to the Quentin Ranch with a riot of wildflowers and the birth of new calves. Penelope continued teaching at the Platteville school, while also embracing her role as wife and mother. The boys flourished under her guidance, William's reserved nature blossoming into confident leadership, while Daniel's natural exuberance found constructive outlets. As summer approached, Penelope made an announcement over supper one evening. I have news, she said, meeting Yates's eyes with a smile that held secrets. By Christmas, our family will grow by one more. The boys looked confused until Yates, his face alight with joy, explained that they would have a new brother or sister. Daniel immediately began suggesting names, while William asked practical questions about where the baby would sleep and whether it would affect their school arrangements. "We'll manage," Yates assured him, reaching across the table to take Penelope's hand. "Just as we've managed everything else together." In December of 1879, exactly 1 year after their wedding, Penelope gave birth to a son they named James David Quentin, honoring both Yates's father and his brother. As she held her newborn while William and Daniel crowded close to see their new brother, with Yates's arm protectively around them all, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. The teacher from Boston and the rancher from Colorado had built something remarkable together, a family founded on love, respect, and the courage to begin anew when life's storms had threatened to overwhelm them both. Their story, like the frontier itself, was one of challenge and triumph, of hardship transformed by perseverance, and ultimately of love that could weather any blizzard. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and the ranch prospered, Penelope and Yates never forgot those first uncertain months when a woman seeking rest for her heart and a man needing a wife before the harvest found in each other exactly what they hadn't known. They were looking for a love strong enough to last a lifetime.